The crowd had gathered in the middle of the alien colony. The sun was setting behind the tall crystal towers, turning the ground red like blood. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the center stage where a prisoner stood. Heavy chains were wrapped around his arms, his legs, even his neck. He was tall, his skin pale and marked with scars. His eyes burned with a strange fire that made people step back even when he could not move. They called him the Predator, the most dangerous being their world had ever seen. The council had already decided his fate, death at sunrise. Children hid behind their mothers, whispering stories they had heard. He killed 100 with his bare hands. No cage can hold him. One look in his eyes and you'll see your death. The elders nodded, saying the decision was right. A beast like him could never live among them. Yet when the prisoner raised his head, there was no fear in him. Instead, he smiled, a small, cold smile that made the guards tighten their grip on their weapons. One of the guards hit him with the end of a staff, forcing him to kneel. The Predator didn't fight back. He only stared at the council members above him, as if measuring their worth. The leader of the council, an old alien with silver scales, raised his hand to silence the noise. This creature has brought nothing but death. He will face the blade tomorrow when the first light falls. The crowd cheered, but there was unease hidden in their voices. Suddenly, the silence broke with the sound of footsteps. A woman walked forward, her robes dark and simple. She was not a council leader, not a warrior, but everyone knew her face. She was the widow of a fallen soldier, a woman who had survived many losses yet still stood proud. She looked at the Predator with steady eyes, not with fear, not with hate, but with something no one could understand. "Wait," she said, her voice calm but sharp enough to cut through the noise. The guards froze. The council frowned. The Predator tilted his head, watching her closely. She walked to the edge of the platform and faced the elders. "You call him a beast. You say he must die. But you are blind. Do you not see what stands before you? This is not a beast. This is a weapon." Gasps moved through the crowd. Some shouted at her, calling her mad. Others whispered, confused. The old council leader narrowed his eyes. "You dare question the council's judgment? His crimes are clear." The woman did not step back. "His crimes are clear, yes, but his skills are clearer. We waste his strength by killing him. Do you not see the enemies waiting outside our borders? Do you not hear the whispers of raiders who plan to strike? You will throw away the only blade sharp enough to cut them down." The Predator's chains rattled as he shifted, leaning forward just enough to study her. For the first time, his smile faded, replaced by curiosity. No one had ever spoken like this about him. No one had ever dared. The guards looked nervous. One muttered, "He'll kill her where she stands if we free him." But the widow turned her eyes toward the prisoner, locking gaze with him. Her voice lowered, almost a whisper, but everyone could hear. "If he wanted to kill me, I would already be dead." The air grew heavier. The crowd became restless, torn between fear and fascination. Children peeked from behind their parents again, their wide eyes glowing with a mix of terror and awe. The Predator's lips moved, almost speaking, but no sound came out. His silence was louder than words. The old council leader slammed his staff against the ground. "Enough! He dies at sunrise. The council has spoken." But the widow did not move aside. Instead, she stepped closer to the chained prisoner, so close that his shadow fell over her. "Killing him is waste," she said firmly. "I know a better use for his deadly skills." The Predator raised his head fully now, his chains groaning as he tested their strength. His eyes, once cold fire, softened just a little. A strange tension ran through the crowd. For a moment, everyone felt as if something powerful had shifted, as if history itself had taken a new path. The guards tightened their grips, afraid of what might happen next. The widow turned back to the council, her voice steady. "Give him to me. Let me decide his fate. If he fails, his death will be on my hands. But if he succeeds, then you will see what true strength means." The Predator finally spoke, his voice deep and rough, almost like a growl. "Better use?" His words carried across the silent square. It was the first time anyone had heard him speak since his capture. The woman did not flinch. She only nodded once, as if they already understood each other. The crowd's heartbeat seemed to echo through the air. Some shouted for his death. Others stayed quiet, waiting to see what the council would decide. The Predator's smile returned, But it was different now, less cruel, more dangerous. He lowered his head again, as if already agreeing to something no one else could understand. The sun slipped lower, and shadows stretched long across the ground. The guards looked to the council for orders, their hands shaking. The council leader hesitated for the first time. The silence felt like the moment before a storm. And in that silence, the fate of the predator hung not on chains, but on the strange bond forming between a deadly prisoner and a woman who refused to see him as only a monster. Would they kill him at dawn? Or had the widow's words already planted doubt strong enough to break tradition? The crowd waited for an answer. The predator waited too, his chains heavy, but his spirit suddenly lighter, as if for the first time in years, death was not the only path ahead. The predator was not killed at sunrise. Instead, heavy chains still bound his arms and legs as he was dragged to a dark stone chamber beneath the council hall. Torches flickered against the damp walls, and the air smelled of iron and ash. Guards pushed him inside, locking the doors behind them. The widow followed slowly, her footsteps calm and sure. She stopped a few feet away from him, studying him with quiet eyes, while the guards stood at the corners, ready to strike if he moved. The predator sat down on the cold ground without being told, the chains clinking as he crossed his arms. His gaze never left the widow. Silence filled the chamber, heavy and tense, until she finally spoke. "You should be dead right now. Instead, you are here." He tilted his head slightly, his eyes narrowing. "Why?" His voice was rough, like stone grinding against stone. "Because I think your death is useless," she answered simply. "But your life, your skills, they can serve a purpose." The predator laughed softly, a sound that made the guards grip their weapons tighter. It was not the laugh of joy, but of disbelief. "Purpose? I have only ever been used as a weapon. They call me predator because that is all I am. What makes you different?" The widow's eyes did not flinch. "Because I will not use you as a tool. I will give you a choice. Work for me or die. The decision is yours." The words surprised even the guards. No one had ever spoken to him like that. No one had offered him choice. They had only ever given him orders or chains. The predator leaned forward, his eyes glowing faintly in the torchlight. "And if I refuse?" The widow did not raise her voice. "Then the council will get what it wants, and you will face the blade. But if you accept, you will be more than their monster. You will fight for something greater." For the first time, he looked away, his gaze falling on the iron floor. He remembered the blood he had spilled, the screams of those who had tried to chain him before. He remembered how easy it was to kill, how natural it felt, yet how empty it left him afterward. He had always told himself he did not care, that he was born for violence. But hearing her speak about something greater stirred a part of him he thought was long dead. The guards were growing restless. One of them whispered to the widow, "He is dangerous. He will betray you." She only shook her head. No, if he wanted to escape, he would have done it already. The predator lifted his chains and let them drop again with a loud clatter. "You are not wrong," he said slowly. "I could kill these men and walk out of here tonight. Nothing would stop me." His eyes flashed, and the guards stiffened in fear. Then his smile returned, sharp and cold. "But I am still here." The widow took a step closer, her courage unshaken. "Because you want to know if I am serious." His silence was the answer. She walked to a small table in the corner of the chamber and unrolled a map across it. Strange markings and symbols showed enemy camps, raider movements, and weak points along the colony's borders. She pointed to one area marked in red. "They will strike here soon. Our guards are weak, untrained, and afraid. The council pretends we are safe, but I know better. If you fight for me, you will protect more than your life. You will protect an entire people who hate you but need you." The predator rose slowly to his feet. The chains groaned as he moved, his shadow stretching across the wall like a beast ready to hunt. He studied the map, then her face, then the guards. His eyes locked back onto hers. "You would trust me with this?" "I would trust you," she said without hesitation. That word hit him harder than any chain, any blade, any wound. Trust. It was something he had never been given. People feared him, used him, cursed him, but never trusted him. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, without warning, he pulled on the chains with all his strength. The guards shouted, rushing forward, but the widow raised her hand to stop them. The chains did not break, but the iron bolts in the wall cracked under the pressure. Dust fell from the ceiling. He released his grip, breathing heavily. Then he laughed again, softer this time. You want my choice? Very well, I will fight. Not for them, for you. Because you are the only one who does not see me as only a monster. The guards looked at each other in disbelief. One of them whispered, He agreed? Another muttered, Or he is playing with us. But the widow nodded, calm and steady. Then it is settled. You will serve me. Your chains will remain until you prove yourself, but they are not forever. The predator tilted his head, his smile returning, but it was no longer empty. It carried a spark of something else. Curiosity. Maybe even hope. You think I need to prove myself? Then give me something worth proving. The widow rolled up the map, her eyes sharp with determination. You will have your chance soon. As the guards led him back to his dark cell, the predator glanced over his shoulder one last time. For the first time in years, his steps did not feel like they were carrying him toward death. They carried him toward something unknown, something dangerous, something that might change everything. In the silence of his cell, he whispered to himself, Work for her or die. At least now I have a choice. The chains rattled softly, but in his heart, a new sound began to grow, the faint echo of freedom. The night was quiet in the alien colony, but beneath that silence, danger was moving. A raiding group had crossed the outer lands, their weapons glowing in the dark. They were hunters, mercenaries who thrived on fear. The guards of the colony stood at the gates, nervous and unsure. They had heard rumors of this enemy, how they burned villages and left nothing but ash. Fear spread among the soldiers, and many wished to run. The council had promised safety, but when the enemy torches lit up the horizon, everyone knew the lie was broken. The widow stood at the center of the defense line, her eyes sharp and her voice steady. Hold your ground, she ordered, but she could see their weakness. They were not ready for this fight. The enemy marched closer, their war cries echoing through the air. The guards' hands trembled on their weapons. Some even whispered, We cannot win this. Deep below the ground, in the stone chamber, the predator waited. His chains were still heavy, but he could hear the distant cries of alarm. He smiled to himself in the dark. Violence was calling, and his blood stirred like fire. Soon, footsteps thundered down the hall, and the door to his cell burst open. 2 guards rushed in, their faces pale with fear. Behind them, the widow appeared, her robe torn from running. She looked at him with urgency. This is your chance, she said. The predator tilted his head, his smile slow and dangerous. The test you promised? She nodded. The raiders are here. Prove yourself now, or the council will execute you tomorrow. Do you accept? The predator pulled at his chains, making them rattle like thunder. Open them, he demanded. The guards froze. One of them whispered, He'll turn on us the moment he's free. The other shook his head, terrified. But the widow stepped forward, pulling the key from her belt. She unlocked the cuffs around his wrists. The iron fell to the ground with a heavy clang. She unlocked his ankles next, and the predator rose slowly to his full height. For the first time since his capture, he stood unchained. The guards backed away in fear. His presence filled the room like a storm. His muscles tightened, his eyes glowing faintly in the torchlight. The predator stretched his arms as if testing his freedom. Then he looked at the widow, his voice low but clear. Tell me where to kill. Moments later, the gates of the colony burst open under enemy fire. Raiders stormed through, shouting in triumph, cutting down any guard in their path. The defenders panicked, many dropping their weapons and fleeing. But then a shadow moved among them, faster than their eyes could follow. The predator was loose. He leapt into the fray with a roar that shook the walls. His bare hands caught the first raider by the throat and snapped it like dry wood. Blood sprayed across the ground. The enemy faltered, shocked at the sudden monster in their midst. The predator moved like lightning, tearing through armored soldiers as if they were paper. A blade cut across his shoulder, but he ignored it, driving his fist into the attacker's chest with bone-cracking force. The guards stopped running and stared in disbelief. They had heard the stories, but seeing him in battle was something else. He was not just a fighter. He was death itself, walking among them. The raiders tried to surround him, but he moved faster, every strike precise, every kill merciless. One by one, bodies fell until the ground was littered with blood and broken weapons. The widow watched from the wall, her heart pounding. She had gambled everything on this moment. If he failed, the colony was lost. But he did not fail. He dominated the battlefield as if it belonged to him. Even when more raiders poured through the gates, he faced them without hesitation, his laughter echoing like thunder. At one point, 3 raiders attacked at once, their blades slashing from different angles. The predator ducked low, twisted, and with a burst of power, broke one man's arm, drove his elbow into another's skull, and kicked the last one so hard he flew against the wall, lifeless. The guards gasped, unable to believe their eyes. For the first time, they cheered. Not for their council, not for their commanders, but for him. "The predator fights for us!" Someone shouted. The cheer spread quickly, lifting the spirits of those who had been ready to flee only moments ago. They rallied behind him, striking with new strength, their courage renewed. The raiders realized too late that their advantage was gone. Fear spread among their ranks. They had expected weak guards and an easy victory. Instead, they had walked into the path of a living weapon. The predator hunted them down, every movement filled with raw power and deadly skill. His eyes glowed with savage joy, but not the empty madness they expected. There was purpose now. By the time the last raider fell, silence returned to the colony. Smoke rose from the broken gates, and the ground was stained red. The predator stood among the bodies, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. Blood dripped from his hands, but his eyes searched for only one face. The widow stepped forward slowly, her eyes fixed on him. For a moment, no one moved. The guards held their weapons tight, unsure if he would turn on them now that the battle was over. But he did not. He walked to her, stopping only a few feet away. He tilted his head, his expression unreadable, then spoke in a low, steady voice. "Is this proof enough?" The widow held his gaze, her face calm even as the guards trembled. "Yes," she said firmly. "You are no longer only a prisoner. You are a protector now." The predator looked around at the crowd of guards staring at him with wide eyes. Some were still afraid, but others now looked at him with respect. His lips curved into a dangerous smile, but for the first time, it was not empty. He had proven himself, and everyone knew this was only the beginning. The days after the battle were restless. The colony was safe, but the air carried whispers. Some called the predator a hero, others still called him a monster. The guards who had seen him fight spoke of his speed, his strength, the way he tore through the raiders as if they were nothing. Yet the council remained silent. They had wanted him dead, but now they could not deny what they had witnessed. The predator had saved them. Still, fear was a hard habit to break. The predator was not returned to his dark cell. Instead, he was kept under watch in a large chamber near the edge of the colony. Chains no longer bound him, but guards stood outside day and night. To many, he was free enough to fight for them, but not free enough to walk among them. Yet he did not complain. He sat quietly, sharpening a broken blade he had taken from the battlefield. His movements were slow, controlled, and precise, like a hunter waiting for his next prey. The widow visited him often. She brought food, water, and sometimes only silence. At first, the predator ignored her, speaking only when necessary. But little by little, her calm presence worked through the walls he had built around himself. One evening, as the sun fell and the room glowed with fading light, she placed a bowl of stew in front of him. He looked at it, then at her, and finally asked, "Why do you not fear me?" Her answer came without hesitation. "Because I see more than what you have done. I see what you can still become." He stared at her for a long moment. No one had ever spoken to him like that. His whole life had been chains, commands, and blood. He had been used like a beast, treated like a weapon. But she spoke as if he was something else, something human. The thought unsettled him. "I am not like them," he said quietly, nodding toward the colony beyond the walls. "No," she agreed. "You are not. But that does not make you less. It makes you necessary." Her words settled in him like fire beneath ash. He lowered his head, the faintest trace of something new in his eyes, hesitation. That night, danger crept again. The colony was not free of threats, for enemies worked in the shadows. An assassin slipped through the guards with poison-coated blades, moving silently toward the widow's quarters. The predator, sitting alone in his chamber, felt something strange, an instinct pulling at him, warning him. Without waiting for permission, he moved. The guards outside tried to stop him, but he shoved them aside with little effort. His steps were fast, almost inhuman, carrying him through the dark alleys. He reached the widow's home just as the assassin broke inside. The predator smashed through the door with a roar, startling the killer. The blade struck, aimed at the widow's heart, but the predator caught the attacker's wrist in midair. The poison burned against his skin, but he did not let go. With a twist and a growl, he broke the assassin's arm and slammed him to the ground. The fight was short. The predator's rage ended it quickly. The widow stood frozen for a moment, staring at him. He had not been ordered to protect her. He had chosen to. She looked at the body of the assassin, then back at him. "Why?" she whispered. The predator's breathing was heavy, his eyes glowing faintly in the dark. He looked at her with something different this time. Not hunger, not violence, but something almost like loyalty. "Because you are the only one who sees me as more than a beast," he said. The words struck her heart. For the first time since her husband's death, she felt something stir inside her, something dangerous but warm. She stepped closer, her eyes meeting his without fear. "Then do not prove me wrong." The predator nodded once, slow and deliberate. For him, that was a promise. After that night, their bond grew stronger. When the widow walked through the colony, he walked with her. The guards followed at a distance, but the people could see clearly. The predator did not serve the council. He served her. He never spoke much, but his presence beside her was louder than words. The children who once hid now peeked at him with wide eyes. Some even whispered that he was her shadow, a monster tamed by her hand. The predator himself did not understand what was changing. He had spent years drowning in blood, but now, for the first time, his hands had defended instead of destroyed. Protecting her had felt different, strange, almost good. At night, when he lay in his chamber, he thought of her words, "I see what you can still become." They repeated in his mind like an echo he could not silence. One evening, as they walked together, she stopped and turned to him. "You are not only my weapon," she said softly. "You are my ally." He studied her carefully, as if testing the weight of her words. Then, for the first time in many years, he bowed his head slightly. It was not submission, but respect. The guards watching from afar whispered in disbelief. The predator had bowed. To them, it was unthinkable. To her, it was the beginning of something greater. But the council did not see it that way. From the high tower, the elders looked down with cold eyes. They whispered of danger, of betrayal, of how the widow's influence was twisting the beast. They planned in secret, deciding that this bond was too dangerous to allow. To them, he would never be anything but a monster, no matter how many lives he saved. The predator did not yet know of the council's plots. All he knew was that the woman who had stopped his death now walked at his side, and for the first time in his life, he wanted to be more than a predator. He wanted to be the protector she believed he could be. The colony still whispered about the predator. Some people began to see him as a guardian, but others could not forget the blood on his hands. The guards were divided. Half respected him after watching him save the colony, while the other half feared he would one day turn against them. But the strongest voices of all were the council elders. In their hidden chambers, they spoke in low, angry tones. "He grows stronger each day. He listens to her, not us. She has bent the beast to her will. This is dangerous. If he rises against us, no one will stop him." The oldest elder, his silver scales glowing faintly in the lamplight, slammed his staff on the floor. "We made a mistake sparing him. He is not a soldier. He is not a protector. He is still the predator. And we must end this before the widow blinds us all with her foolish hope." That night, the council wrote a secret order. It was simple. The predator must be executed at once. The guards chosen for the task were told to carry it out quietly, without warning the widow. If she resisted, she would be silenced too. None of them dared question the order. Fear of the predator's strength was greater than their loyalty to the woman who had saved him. But secrets rarely stay hidden. One of the younger guards, who had seen the predator fight and had cheered for him, overheard the plan. Fear twisted his stomach, but guilt was stronger. He went to the widow in the dead of night and told her everything. She listened in silence, her face calm, though her eyes burned with anger. When the young guard finished, his voice shaking, she placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "You did the right thing." Leave the rest to me." The widow hurried to the predator's chamber. He was awake, sharpening the same broken blade he had kept since the battle. When she entered, he looked up, his sharp eyes instantly catching the tension in her steps. "What is it?" he asked, his voice low. She hesitated for only a moment, then told him the truth. "The council means to kill you, tonight." The predator's hands stilled. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, slowly, he set the blade aside and leaned back against the wall. "Of course they do," he murmured with a bitter smile. "It was only a matter of time. They fear what they cannot control." The widow stepped closer. "You saved their lives. You saved this colony. Yet they see only a beast." His smile faded, replaced by something darker. "It is all I have ever been to them, to anyone." He turned his eyes to her, sharp and searching. "And you? Do you see me as something else, or are you only lying to yourself?" Her heart tightened at his words. She met his gaze without flinching. "I am not lying. You proved yourself to me the night you saved us from the raiders. You proved it again when you chose to protect me from the assassin. That is not the work of a beast. That is the work of a man who has more inside him than violence." For a moment, the predator looked almost shaken. He had faced blades, fire, chains, and death without fear. Yet her words unsettled him more than all of it. He dropped his gaze to the ground, his voice quiet. "Then why do I feel loyal to you? Why do I hesitate to kill when before it was all I knew?" She stepped even closer until she stood directly in front of him. "Because you are not only a killer, you just needed someone to believe it. And I do." Before he could answer, the sound of footsteps echoed in the hall outside. The guards were coming. Their voices were low, but the scrape of their armor and the clink of weapons gave them away. The widow turned sharply toward the door, her hand already moving toward the knife she carried. The predator rose to his full height, his shadow stretching across the wall. His smile returned, but this time it was not bitter. It was dangerous. "So they wish to test me again?" The door burst open. A group of armed guards poured in, blades drawn, eyes full of fear. The leader pointed his weapon at the predator. "By order of the council, you are to be executed." The widow stepped in front of him before they could advance. "No," she said fiercely, "you will not touch him. He is under my protection." The guards hesitated. They respected her, but the council's command was absolute. "Step aside, widow," the leader warned, "or we will be forced to act against you as well." The predator let out a low growl, his muscles coiling like a wild beast ready to strike. But before he could move, the widow lifted her voice. "If you kill him, you kill me too. Is that what you want? Will you spill the blood of your own people just to satisfy the council's fear?" The room fell into silence. The guards looked at each other, uncertain. They had been ordered to kill, but her words cut into them. She was not just any woman. She was respected, even loved for her strength and wisdom. To raise a blade against her would make them traitors in the eyes of many. The leader's hand trembled. He looked at the predator, who stood behind her unchained, his eyes glowing with barely contained fury. Then he looked at the widow, who stood unarmed between them, fearless. Finally, with a curse, he lowered his blade. "This is not over," he spat. "The council will hear of this." The guards withdrew, their footsteps fading into the night. The predator exhaled slowly, his smile widening. He looked at the widow, his voice rough but steady. "You risked your life for me." She met his gaze, her own voice strong. "Because you already risked yours for us." For a long time they stood in silence, the weight of what had just happened heavy in the air. At last, the predator spoke again. "Then it is decided. I am yours now, not their prisoner, not their weapon, yours. If they want my blood, they will have to fight me for it." The widow felt a chill at his words, but also a strange warmth. The bond between them had deepened, forged not by chains or fear, but by choice. And though the council plotted in secret, neither of them knew that a greater storm was already gathering beyond the colony walls. One that would test this bond more than any blade ever could. The storm came sooner than anyone expected. At dawn, the alarm bells rang across the colony. Scouts rushed through the streets shouting warnings. A massive army was approaching from the north, larger than anything they had faced before. These were not simple raiders. They were a war clan, trained and merciless, bringing with them a beast so huge it made the ground shake with every step. The people screamed. Children cried, and the guards struggled to hold their posts. Everyone looked to the council for answers, but the elders only argued among themselves, their fear louder than their wisdom. The widow stood on the wall, her eyes on the horizon. Smoke rose from the enemy's torches, and the roar of the beast carried on the wind. She knew the colony would fall if they fought with only weak soldiers and broken courage. The guards around her were pale, their hands trembling on their weapons. None of them believed they could win. She clenched her fists, her decision already clear. There was only one who could stand against this. She turned and gave the order. Bring him. The predator arrived minutes later, walking with steady steps, his body tense but his expression unreadable. He looked at the battlefield ahead and then at her. "This is what you saved me for," he said quietly. She nodded. "Yes, the council still sees you as a monster, but I know better. Only you can face this army." The predator studied her, his sharp eyes searching hers for hesitation. There was none. Slowly he smiled. Though it was not cruel, it was the smile of a hunter finally given prey worth his teeth. "Then unchain me fully," he said. "Let me fight as I was born to fight." The guards nearby muttered in fear. One of them shouted, "He'll turn on us once he's loose. We'll all die." But the widow silenced them with one sharp look. "If he wished to kill us, he would have done so already. Today, he will kill for us." With that, she stepped closer and placed her hand on his shoulder. It was a small gesture, but it meant more than chains, more than orders. It meant trust. He nodded once, a predator acknowledging his pack. The enemy reached the gates by midday. Their war cries filled the air, and the beasts they had brought roared so loudly that the ground shook beneath the walls. The guards raised their weapons, but most felt hopeless. Then, as the gates creaked under the enemy's assault, the predator stepped forward. He carried no heavy armor, no shield, only a long spear and the broken blade he had kept since his capture. His eyes glowed like fire as he faced the impossible. The gates shattered. The enemy poured through, their beast leading the charge. The predator moved. He was faster than the eye could follow, leaping into the storm of soldiers with a roar that froze them in their tracks. His spear struck first, piercing through the chest of a giant warrior and tearing free in a spray of blood. He spun, slammed another aside with the weight of his body, and cut down a third with his broken blade. The massive beast lunged at him, its maw wide enough to swallow him whole. The predator rolled aside, the ground shaking as its jaws snapped shut where he had stood. With impossible strength, he drove his spear upward into the beast's throat. The creature bellowed in fury, thrashing wildly, but he held firm, twisting the weapon until blood poured like a river. The guards on the wall gasped, unable to believe what they were seeing. The monster they had feared was saving them from a monster greater still. The battle raged on. The predator fought without pause, every strike brutal and precise. Enemies fell in dozens, their confidence shattering as they realized this was not a normal man. This was death itself, unleashed. His laughter rose above the chaos, wild and terrifying, yet to the people watching, it was the sound of hope. The widow never took her eyes off him. Her heart pounded with fear, not of him, but of losing him. She had gambled everything on this moment. If he fell, they would all fall. Yet as she watched, she saw something change in him. He was not only killing for the sake of blood, he was fighting with purpose, his movements not only fierce, but protective. He positioned himself between the enemy and the colony, his body becoming the wall that held them back. The war clan began to break. Their beast lay dead, their warriors falling faster than they could advance. For the first time, they tasted fear. Some tried to retreat, but the predator hunted them down, leaving no chance for them to regroup. When at last the survivors fled into the distance, silence fell over the battlefield. The predator stood alone among the fallen, his body covered in blood, his chest heaving with heavy breaths. The guards lowered their weapons slowly. First, there was silence. Then one voice shouted from the wall, "He saved us!" Another echoed, "The predator is our protector." Soon, cheers erupted, spreading through the colony like fire. For the first time, the people were not afraid of him. They praised him. They honored him. The predator lifted his head, hearing their voices. For years, he had been cursed as a beast, hated as a monster. Now, for the first time, he was called something else, protector. His lips curved into a smile, not cruel, not bitter, but almost human. The widow came down from the wall and walked to him. The people watched in silence as she stopped before him. Blood dripped from his hands, his body scarred from the battle, but his eyes were steady. She looked at him and asked, "Do you see now? You are not only a predator, you are more." He studied her face for a long moment. Then, in a voice rough but sure, he said, "Perhaps I am what you see in me." Her hand reached for his, unafraid of the blood that covered it. He allowed it, their bond sealed in front of all. The people watching knew what the council feared had already happened. The predator was no longer just a weapon. He had become a symbol, and nothing, not even the council's power, could change that now. The battlefield was quiet now. Smoke rose from the broken gates, and the ground was littered with the bodies of the enemy. The people of the colony had seen the predator fight, had seen him stand alone against an army and a beast that should have destroyed them all. The cheers still echoed in the air, but behind those cheers, there was fear too. The council watched from their high tower, their faces pale. They had wanted him dead. Instead, he had saved them. Now they feared him more than ever, because a monster in chains was dangerous, but a hero with the people's respect was unstoppable. That night, the council gathered in secret. Their voices were sharp, angry, desperate. He cannot be allowed to live. The people are beginning to follow him. Soon they will listen to him more than us. He will take everything from us. Another added, "The widow has bound him to her. If she commands, he will destroy us." The oldest elder slammed his staff on the floor. "Then it is decided. At dawn, we demand his death. No more delays." But word of their plan spread again. The same young guard who had warned the widow before overheard their whispers and rushed to her home. His voice shook as he told her, "They mean to kill him, even after all he has done." The widow closed her eyes for a long moment, then whispered, "Of course they do. They are blinded by fear." The predator sat nearby, silent as always, sharpening his blade. He had heard enough to understand. Without looking up, he said, "So it comes to this again. They cannot let me live." His tone was calm, almost accepting. The widow turned to him, anger flashing in her eyes. "You saved them. You saved their children, their homes. They cannot see past their own fear, but I will not let them take you again." He finally raised his head, his eyes glowing faintly in the firelight. "I was never meant to belong here. I was a weapon, a shadow in chains. Perhaps this is the only way it ends." Her voice hardened. "No, you are not their beast. You are mine, and I will not lose you." At dawn, the council gathered the people in the main square. The elders stood tall, their voices carrying across the crowd. "The predator is a danger to us all. He is not one of us. He will never be one of us. For the safety of the colony, he must be destroyed." But this time, the crowd did not cheer. They whispered instead, remembering what they had seen the day before. They remembered the beast he had slain, the army he had broken, the way he stood like a wall between them and death. Slowly, voices rose from the crowd. "He saved us. He is not a monster. We would be dead without him." The predator stood beside the widow at the edge of the square, his head tilted as he listened. For the first time, the voices of the people were not against him. The widow stepped forward, her voice sharp and clear. "You call him a monster, yet he is the reason you are alive. You sit in your tower fearing him while he bled for you. If he is to die, then let the people decide, not you." The council shouted in anger, but their voices were drowned out by the crowd. The cheers grew louder, spreading like fire. "Protector! Protector!" they cried. The predator looked around, his chest rising with heavy breaths. His whole life, he had been cursed, hated, chained. Now the same voices that once condemned him were lifting him high. For a moment, he almost could not believe it was real. The council, desperate, made one last attempt. "He will turn on you. He will kill you all in the end." The predator stepped forward finally, his deep voice carrying across the square. "If I wished to kill you, I would have done it already. I had the chance 100 times, yet I chose to fight for you. Not because you deserved it, but because she," he pointed to the widow, "saw in me what no one else did. You see a monster. She saw a man, and perhaps she was right." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of chains he dropped at his feet. The iron cuffs, the shackles that had bound him, lay shattered on the stone. He had broken them with his own strength earlier that morning, and now he left them behind like the skin of something that no longer existed. The widow stepped beside him, her hand slipping into his without hesitation. The people saw it and cheered even louder, their voices shaking the walls. The predator, once feared, now stood as a symbol of defiance, of strength, of hope. The council knew they had lost, yet even in victory, a question hung in the air. The predator turned his head, his eyes on the colony he had saved. He spoke quietly to the widow, though the people closest could hear. They call me protector now, but can I ever truly be one of them? She squeezed his hand tightly. You do not need to be one of them. You only need to be who you are, and who you are is mine. For the first time in years, the predator felt something unfamiliar, something he had thought was lost forever. It was peace. The crowd still shouted his name, but inside, the war in his heart had begun to settle. He was no longer only the predator. He was a protector, a man with a choice, and for the first time, a man with someone who believed in him. As the sun rose high over the colony, painting the square in gold, the predator looked at the broken chains at his feet and then at the woman by his side. His voice was steady as he whispered, "Then I choose life." The people cheered once more, louder than ever. The council, silent and powerless, slipped away into the shadows. The predator, once sentenced to death, had found something greater than survival. He had found purpose. He had found trust. And he had found a place where, for the first time, he was more than the monster they had named him. He was exactly what she had seen all along.